Cosmonaut Quickie!
Yippee! Black Widow is finally out. A movie that was supposed to come out last year, but the world did an oopsie and it had to sit on the shelf for a little while. And as such, we all kinda had a forced hiatus from Marvel movies for a whole year. So would I say that Black Widow is worth the wait? No! Now, I'm usually pretty nice to dumb summer blockbusters. I mean, look at how forgiving I am to the Fast and Furious movies. But the difference is that I kind of expect those movies to be bad, and I'm kind of just watching them to laugh at them. But this movie is just as stupid in some ways, and yet I was left kind of numb. This movie didn't really do it for me, if we're being honest. And yeah, I've said before that Black Widow isn't my favorite character. I think she was pretty underwritten until Endgame, and I like her a lot in that one, but then she died in that one. And now we get a movie explaining her backstory, but it's not even really about her backstory. And that's what kind of confused me. See, this movie takes place after Civil War, and it explains what she was doing while the government was hunting her. And I was like, what? I don't care about that. Civil War was fucking forever ago. Obama was president when that movie came out. What I'm trying to say is that this movie feels like it got lost in the time stream. Outside of the post-credit scene, this totally feels like it was supposed to come out years ago. This movie feels strange and unnecessary. But at the same time, I still went into the movie with an open mind, and while I do think the movie is generic and it has no purpose, I think the nicest thing I can say is that it is watchable. The performances are all on point, even though I'd say David Harbour's Russian accent definitely could use a little work. But hey, that's normal for Marvel. However, ScarJo doesn't really have much to do or say in this movie. There's kind of a tacked-on motivation near the last half of the movie where she suddenly cares about her birth mother all of a sudden. But other than that, she's kind of just a nice lady who knows karate. I think her surrogate family gets a lot more characterization, and on one hand, it is nice that the other characters have some stuff going on. I think this is the first MCU side movie I've seen in a while where the plucky sidekicks are actually cute and entertaining, and I think the standout character in this is Florence Pugh's character. I liked her a lot, more than I expected to. I saw her in the trailer and I kind of thought she'd just be some other cold-blooded assassin character to run around with Black Widow, but she was way more than that, and I was into it. She was very much the annoying little sister character, but she was also a murderer, and I think that's a fun combination. I wouldn't mind seeing her in other stuff in the future. But other than that, I can't say this movie really succeeded in hooking me. There was no draw, nothing to pull me in and convince me to care. And I think that's kind of important for this movie. Like, everybody knows Natasha's dead. Everybody saw Endgame. So how are you going to convince us to watch this movie? What's the sell? Well, there just isn't one. This is just a movie showing stuff that Black Widow did one time. And I'm perfectly fine with a Marvel property that isn't concerned with some overarching plot line. A movie or even show that's perfectly fine being its own thing, telling its own story set in a smaller scale. But this movie isn't using that to try to do something interesting or different. It is very much just a normal action Marvel movie. And the annoying thing is that in this movie she constantly talks about this other mission that she had. That fabled Budapest mission, the one that her and Hawkeye talk about all the time. In this movie she talks about stuff that they did during that mission, and it sounds fucking epic. She basically explains the plot of a Die Hard movie. She's like, oh, we were stuck in here and we spent 2 days fighting our way out of this building. And I'm like, man, why can't I watch that movie? That sounds awesome. That movie wouldn't be connected to the overarching MCU plot. It would just be a side story, but it sounds like it would be a lot more interesting, so it was a little annoying. Instead, we have this movie where the plot is centered around her trying to tie up the loose ends of that mission that we never saw. There's a moment where we get a quick flashback of Natasha making a decision from that mission, and it's pretty morally ambiguous. And I was just thinking about how that would be such a cool and intense scene if it was the climax of a different movie, instead of a flashback from what sounded like a more interesting story. I mean, the villain in this movie is someone we don't know and have no context for, because she knew him back then, and we didn't know her back then. So it's pretty hard to get invested. There's just a lot that I wanted more of. I was constantly just unsatisfied with what I was watching. For instance, there's a character in this movie who constantly brags about having fought Captain America, even though he never did. And later on, when he fights someone who uses Captain America's moves and fights like Captain America, I kind of expected some reincorporation, like some kind of line or moment to bring it all full circle. But nope, that bit is just over. And it's weird, because I was like, oh, I thought there was a point that we were trying to make here, but I guess not, whatever. I really kept expecting more, even though the movie never promised me anything, which is fine, I guess that's on me. But what we end up with is what I would call a normal Marvel movie. The kind that I'm not particularly fond of. The kind of Marvel movie I will watch one time and never watch again. I mean, yeah, the script is competent, it's not cringy or anything, the characters have enough energy to stop you from being bored, but the plot is nothing special, and the action is insanely dull. None of the fights have any tension or emotional weight to them. The movie is just bland. It's a normal movie. And like I said in my Falcon Winter Soldier review, I want a little more out of Marvel stuff nowadays. The bland shit isn't as forgivable to me anymore. And from what I can tell, they seem to be setting up some kind of crossover spy Marvel thing with what I would call the MCU humans. Like, you know, all the normal Avengers, like Bucky and Falcon. And I'm honestly really not looking forward to that, because the MCU is capable of telling some really creative stories now, and the last thing I want to see is more average Jason Bourne-styled action movies starring super spies with slightly enhanced strength. I'm not fully against the idea of Marvel telling more grounded stories, but they aren't doing it well enough for me to care. I would still honestly say that the best Mission Impossible movies are leagues ahead of the best spy Marvel movies. And so far I can say that I am not impressed by what this new era of Marvel movies is offering us. So I'm gonna wrap this one up quickly and give Black Widow a 5 out of 10.